What archaeologists just found at the Church of the Holy Sepulchre is bigger than anyone expected.
For the first time in centuries, researchers have uncovered what's believed to be Jesus' tomb inside the Church of the Holy Sepulchre.
Okay, we are actually inside the tomb of Jesus right now.
What if everything you thought you knew about the tomb of Jesus was only part of the story? For centuries, emperors tried to erase it, armies destroyed it, and believers rebuilt it. Hidden beneath centuries of silence and mystery, this site holds secrets that have only recently begun to surface. This is the shocking story behind the tomb of Jesus, and what they found will leave you questioning everything.
Here we are in the 21st century, in the tomb of Jesus. It's about to be opened, the first time since then.
Around the year 30 to 33 AD, Jesus of Nazareth was crucified just outside the city walls of Jerusalem. After his death, a respected member of the Jewish council, Joseph of Arimathea, took Jesus' body and laid it in a new tomb carved out of rock. As the Gospel of John chapter 19 verse 41 records, "In the place where he was crucified, there was a garden, a new sepulchre, wherein was never man laid." This detail is important because it identifies the tomb as one that had not been used before, setting it apart from other nearby burial sites. 3 days after his burial, something extraordinary happened. Early on the first day of the week, just as dawn was breaking, a group of women, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary among them, went to visit the tomb. Matthew chapter 28 verse 1 says, "Now after the Sabbath, as it began to dawn on the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary came to see the sepulchre." According to Luke chapter 24 verses 1 and 2, they brought spices to anoint Jesus' body, which was the traditional Jewish burial practice. But when they arrived, they found the stone rolled away and the tomb was empty. The empty tomb was not simply a mysterious discovery. According to the Gospels, the women encountered an angel who told them, "He is not here, for he is risen." They were then instructed to tell the disciples what they had seen. Soon after, the disciples themselves visited the tomb, and over the following days, many of them claimed to have seen the risen Jesus in person. One of the earliest written affirmations of this event comes from the Apostle Paul in his first letter to the Corinthians. In chapter 15, verses 3 through 7, Paul summarizes what he describes as the core of the Christian faith. He writes, "Christ died for our sins according to the Scriptures, and that he was buried, and that he rose again the third day, and that he was seen of Cephas, then of the 12. After that, he was seen of above 500 brethren at once." This creed is considered by scholars to have developed within just 2 to 4 years after the crucifixion, making it a historically significant early testimony. Modern scholars widely acknowledge that something powerful happened in the days following Jesus' death. Around 75% of academic scholars agree that the belief in the empty tomb is a genuine historical memory. One particularly compelling point is that the Gospels record women as the first witnesses to the empty tomb. In first-century Jewish society, women's testimonies held little legal weight, so it is unlikely that such a detail would have been invented to strengthen the story. Instead, it suggests that the authors were faithfully recording what actually happened, even if it went against cultural norms. The empty tomb was not just a symbol. For the early Christians, it was proof that Jesus had conquered death. And that moment, quiet and bewildering at first, would change history forever. As the news of the resurrection began to spread like wildfire, Rome took notice. So what would the empire do to silence it? Let's take you into the shocking story of how Rome tried to bury the resurrection, literally. When the message of Jesus' resurrection spread, it began to threaten the power of the Roman Empire. The growing Christian movement, rooted in the belief that Jesus had risen from the dead, could not be ignored. What followed was not just persecution, but a calculated plan to bury the memory of the resurrection, both figuratively and literally. A major turning point came after the Bar Kokhba revolt, which lasted from the year 132 to 135 AD. This Jewish uprising against Roman rule was brutally crushed by the Emperor Hadrian. In the aftermath, Hadrian sought to erase all traces of Jewish and Christian identity in Jerusalem. Around the year 129 or 130 AD, he ordered the complete refoundation of the city. It was renamed Aelia Capitolina, combining his own family name, Aelius, with a dedication to Jupiter Capitolinus, the chief god of the Roman pantheon. As part of this transformation, Hadrian ordered the construction of a new Roman city directly over the ruins of Old Jerusalem. One of the most significant and shocking acts of this project was the erection of a grand temple dedicated to Jupiter, or in some sources, to Venus, over the very site that Christians had long venerated as the tomb of Jesus. This was no accident. The Romans were well aware of the Christian worship that took place at the tomb, and this move was a deliberate attempt to desecrate and overwrite it. The 4th century historian Eusebius of Caesarea, in his work Ecclesiastical History, Book 4, chapters 6.3 to 6.4, recounts how the Romans went to great lengths to hide the sacred site. He wrote that they brought in large quantities of earth from other places, completely covering the area of the tomb. After piling the earth high, they paved it over with stone and erected their pagan structures on top. According to Eusebius, this was not simply about building a city, it was about suppressing the memory of the resurrection by making the tomb inaccessible and invisible. Nearly a century later, in the year 395 AD, the scholar Jerome echoed Eusebius's account. He wrote that from the time of Hadrian, the location that had witnessed the resurrection was deliberately covered and defiled. A statue of Jupiter was placed there, and pagan worship was instituted at the site where Christians once came to pray and remember the risen Christ. Jerome understood the motivation clearly. The persecutors believed that by polluting and hiding the holy place, they could break the faith of Christians and erase the power of the resurrection story. For nearly 2 centuries, the sacred tomb remained buried beneath layers of Roman stone and silence. But then a dramatic shift unfolded. A new emperor rose with a vision would change everything. In the early 4th century, a powerful moment came when Constantine, then a Roman general, claimed to have had a vision before a crucial battle. According to ancient sources, on the eve of the Battle of the Milvian Bridge in the year 312 AD, Constantine saw a cross of light in the sky along with the words, "In this sign, conquer." Inspired by this vision, he ordered his soldiers to place Christian symbols on their shields. When Constantine won the battle and took control of the Western Roman Empire, everything changed. In the year 313 AD, Constantine issued the Edict of Milan, a proclamation that legalized Christianity and brought an end to centuries of imperial persecution. This marked the beginning of a new era in which Christians could worship freely and publicly. Constantine did not stop at simply allowing Christianity to exist. He embraced it and used his power to elevate it across the empire. One of the most important acts of Constantine's reign was carried out through his mother, Helena. Around the years 326 to 328 AD, Helena, now a devout Christian, made a pilgrimage to the Holy Land. Her goal was to locate the original sacred sites tied to the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus. According to the historian Eusebius, Helena was guided by Bishop Macarius of Jerusalem during this journey. With his help, she began a careful investigation to rediscover the lost tomb of Christ. This was not an easy task. The site had been buried for nearly 2 centuries under a Roman pagan temple built by Emperor Hadrian, but Helena and Macarius knew where to look. Early Christian tradition had remembered the location, and the very fact that the Romans had built a temple on top of it became a clue. They ordered the destruction of the pagan shrine, and as the debris was cleared, the long-buried tomb came into view. Eusebius describes this as a moment of awe and triumph. The tomb, hidden for so long, was exposed once again. What had been suppressed by force was now restored by faith. Constantine responded to this discovery by ordering a grand church to be built over the site. Between the years 330 and 335 AD, construction began on what would become the Church of the Holy Sepulchre.
This is a photograph of a unique and mysterious 2,000-year-old tablet or stone. This is the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, where Christians come to celebrate and commemorate the resurrection of Jesus 3 days after the crucifixion.
By the year 335 AD, the original Church of the Holy Sepulchre was completed. This church stood as a monumental symbol of Christian faith, built directly over the burial site that early believers had venerated for centuries. It included both the location of Jesus' crucifixion, known as Golgotha, and his tomb, believed to be the place of the resurrection. For the early Christian world, this was the holiest site on earth. However, the peace did not last. In the year 1009 AD, the church suffered devastating destruction at the hands of Fatimid Caliph al-Hakim, who ordered it completely demolished. This act was meant to strike a blow at Christian worship in Jerusalem. Almost nothing remained. Yet the memory of the site was not lost, and efforts to rebuild it began just decades later. During the 12th century, Crusaders arrived in Jerusalem and undertook the enormous task of rebuilding the church. They reconstructed much of what had been destroyed, adding Romanesque elements and expanding parts of the structure. While the Crusader design changed aspects of the original layout, the core of the site remained centered on the believed location of Jesus' burial and resurrection. Over the centuries, the church continued to face threats, not just from wars, but from fires, earthquakes, and political turmoil. During the time of the Ottoman Empire, various Christian denominations were allowed to maintain the site under strict rules, leading to internal divisions over its care. In the early 19th century, Ottoman authorities approved repairs, including the construction of the current dome and reinforcements to keep the aging structure from collapsing. Maintenance has continued through the modern era under the complex arrangement known as the status quo, which governs how different Christian communities share responsibility for the site. One of the most remarkable moments in the church's recent history came in the year 2016, during a major restoration of the edicule, the small shrine that encloses the traditional tomb of Jesus. For the first time in centuries, a team of experts was allowed to open the marble covering that sealed the burial bench.
It's stretching dozens of feet towards the center, towards the tomb of Christ.
Underneath, they found the original limestone rock surface, believed to be the very place where Jesus' body was laid. They also uncovered a broken slab engraved with a cross which had been placed above the burial spot. Although the slab itself was not dated, mortar found beneath it was scientifically tested using a method called optically stimulated luminescence, or OSL. This test revealed that the mortar dated back to around the year 345 AD, consistent with the time of Constantine's construction. Motivated by these discoveries, archaeologists dug deeper, both literally and historically. What they uncovered next would leave no doubt, offering compelling evidence that pointed directly to the true location of Jesus' tomb. Recent excavations carried out between the year 2022 and 2025 by Sapienza University of Rome have brought new clarity to this sacred site. Among the most remarkable discoveries were ancient plant remains, including olive stones and grape pips embedded deep in the soil near the burial chamber. These botanical remains were scientifically dated to around the year 33 AD, the very time of Jesus' crucifixion. This discovery directly supports the Gospel of John, chapter 19, verse 41, which says, "Now in the place where he was crucified, there was a garden, and in the garden a new sepulchre." The presence of cultivated plants like olives and grapes confirms that the area surrounding the tomb was indeed a garden in the 1st century, just as the biblical account describes. These findings give archaeologists reason to believe that the tomb of Jesus was not only spiritually significant, but also geographically and agriculturally accurate. In the same excavation campaign, researchers uncovered fragments of marble that were part of ancient tomb structures within the Church of the Holy Sepulchre complex. These fragments may have belonged to the original tomb of Joseph of Arimathea, the man who, according to all four Gospels, offered his family tomb for the burial of Jesus. Ongoing geological and mortar analysis is being conducted to determine whether these fragments can be definitively linked to a first-century burial site and confirm their origin. Supporting these discoveries is the expert testimony of archaeologist Jody Magnus. She explains that the rock-cut tombs surrounding the church closely match Jewish burial customs from the early 1st century. These tombs typically featured a central burial bench and carved niches known as kokim, which were used to lay bodies before secondary burial. This type of structure is consistent with the way the Gospels describe Jesus' tomb. For example, Matthew chapter 27 verse 60 says that Joseph laid Jesus in his own new tomb, which he had hewn out in the rock, while Hebrews chapter 13 verse 12 reminds believers that Jesus suffered outside the gate, a reference to the tomb's original location beyond Jerusalem's walls. Archaeologists also found that the layers of mortar used within the edicule, the small shrine covering the tomb, date back to different historical phases. Tests confirm that parts of the mortar belong to the 4th century, when Constantine first built the church, while other layers trace back to later periods like the Crusader era and Ottoman repairs in the 16th century. These results match the known timeline of repeated construction, destruction, and restoration that the site has undergone over the past 17 centuries. Today, the evidence is stronger than ever. Through scripture, eyewitness testimony, historical writings, and modern archaeology, the story of Jesus' tomb has emerged as one of the most thoroughly studied and enduring sacred sites in history. It was lost for a time, but it was never forgotten. And now, with each layer uncovered, the truth continues to rise. So, what do you think of these powerful pieces of evidence surrounding the tomb of Jesus? Share your thoughts in the comments.